As I sit down to write this narrative, the air around me has become cold and thin. The end is near, I'm afraid. But I shall welcome the grip of death. Have nothing else to live for. Everything I have is gone. Quite frankly, everything I know, or have ever known, is gone. Swept away in a single flash of fate. A snap and my entire world was obliterated. But I get ahead of myself. I've sat down here to write what happened, or at least what happened to me. It is all I can do, and I must do it. It is funny now that I think of it. I have the power to alter human history forever. For this document, this one piece of writing, will be the last thing that any human has ever written. It will be the only document that lives on after our race. And since I am the author, I have unlimited power. I will be just, though, fair to human history. I'll just leave out everything before my arrival here, no previous accounts of anything. That way, the horrors of man will die with me. I'm sure if you're reading this, then you're quite confused. I'm assuming that you're not of the human race, as I am fairly certain that we are no more. But if you found this, then you know where I am. Hopefully, my body is floating nearby as you read this. I pause now to ask you something. Look at my face. I'm sure it is frozen in place. The confines of space are quite good at preserving the dead. Look at my face. Look at my expression. Is it twisted in agony? Or peaceful? I pray that it is the latter. I have never feared death, but I've always feared pain. It's quite strange thinking of what I look like dead. I just wonder if a dead man sees his own face after he dies. Just think of that. Just think if that was the last thing you saw, your own face twisted in pain. Then just darkness. Eternal, blinding darkness. I feel an urge to just stop writing and curl into a ball. It's gotten so cold now that my hands won't stop shaking, but while my body is dying, my mind is firing on all pistons. I wonder if this always happens before death. Maybe the mind realizes that all is lost and it sacrifices the body, routing all energy to the brain. That way you can have several moments where everything is perfectly clear. That's what's happening with me. Everything seems clear. Every question I've ever had has been solved. Or maybe I'm just telling myself that. Maybe I'm laying comatose on the floor, and this is just a manifestation of my mind, a last-ditch effort to make death seem easier. I don't think there's a way for me to know for sure. I feel my heartbeat slowing now. My eyes are failing me. Darkness is creeping slowly in from the boundaries of my visions. I feel I have little time to explain such a complex story, so I think I shall begin in the best place. The beginning. It all started with a shower. At least, my story did. I was in the shower when the first announcement was made. That was 3 days ago. I know you're confused as a reader. To me, this all seems perfectly correct, but to you, it must seem like the ravings of a madman. Anything that is... Actually, that is what it is. For the things I've done in the past 3 days, and more than any sane man should do. It's so cold. I want to apologize to you now. When I began this, I had a conscious and quick narrative in mind, but now it seems I've rambled on for a page and I haven't even begun telling you my story. I also apologize for wasting time apologizing to you. How false does it seem? The apology that I just issued you. I'm dead, and yet I still feel as though I've hurt you in some way, and I'm a body floating through space to you. I doubt you gave me more than a second's glance when you first saw me. Yet, I apologize to you. How does it feel to have a dead man's pity? The air is thin now. Breathing has become extraordinarily hard. It seems as though I have to take deep breaths just to keep from suffocating. My head is beginning to feel light, and the urge to laugh is present. Maybe I will. Maybe I'll just start giggling and not stop till all the air has gone and I slowly choke to death. I trudge on, for your sake, and my own. I was in the shower. You already know that. Of course, you don't know where the shower was. Actually, you most likely do. That is, if you found this paper on the desk that I'm writing on. You know what kind of place I'm in. But for the sake of details, I'll tell you anyway. First, though, I must tell you who I am. Then, in turn, what I do, for it would make no sense if I explained where I am and you didn't know who I was or what I did. You see, this place I'm in is no simple structure. No, it's a complex place indeed. And seeing as how I want to tell my story, it would be quite rude of me to not tell you who or what I am, because who I am and what I am is a huge factor in my story, a valuable piece of info that you need to truly understand the complexities surrounding the series of events that I'm about to tell you. My name is Lieutenant Commander Louis Frannick. I work for the NASP. That stands for Neo-American Space Program. The year is 2110. The date is March 7th. Earth is gone. To read this on paper is truly hard. I know Earth is gone. I've known that for the past 3 days now. I saw the planet on its final moments, yet to see it written out in front of me in my own handwriting, it has a sense of finality. The air is thinner yet, so I must go forth, for I fear that if I dawdle any more, then I'll not be able to finish before I perish. So, to continue, I'll tell you where I am. For, as I said earlier, this place plays a huge role in my story. I'm aboard the NAS Alpha 110 Op 1. In simpler terms, the Space Station Alpha, the first lab that the NASP put together. I call it a lab, but in reality, it's a damn spy station. I wish I had more time to explain the state of things on Earth, or rather, the way things used to be. I think I can sum it up in a single word, though. War. Actually 2 words. War and fear. That's why I'm up here. The AS is so paranoid of attack, they broke their own sanctions and put up a military station in orbit. My hand is getting colder. It's weird, as it's just my right hand. Death is near. I feel it, like someone's eyes on your back. I've turned around a couple times, half expecting to see someone, but it's always darkness, and then I remember that they're all dead. Every last person. Dead. Seeing that written brings the feeling to my stomach again. Same feeling I feel when I saw them die. The same feeling I feel when I saw Earth die. Which brings me back to my story. I really must start. The darkness has encroached more. Like I said, death is near. The story must be told. It began for me when I was in the shower. I was washing my hair when the sirens began to scream. I remember it so vividly. The water on my back, the soap on my right hand, the washcloth in my other. I was so innocent and so free and normal. The scent was after the rain. I can still see the box in my mind's eye. Then the sirens. I don't remember myself getting out. I don't remember myself dressing. I don't remember myself running down the hall to the bridge. The next thing that I remember is Rick's face. I can see it perfectly now, his eyes wide, tears flowing down his face. Never before had I seen a man cry, yet Rick let down the floodgates and everything was coming out. "What's the matter?" I asked him. And when I think about it now, my voice is thin and monotone. I can see his face, tears flowing, yet my voice is so small, so unconcerned. "The end," he says. I can see it playing out now in my mind. It's like a rerun of a TV show. I know what will happen next. It still seems exciting. "The end of what?" I ask. The voice of myself still thin, devoid of all emotion. "The end of us," was his reply. The next thing I recall is looking out the viewport, the earth resting there in all her glory. The others had arrived. Emily and Paul. They tried desperately to calm Rick, to make sense of his ramblings, and I just watched the viewport, watched Earth, for I knew. He had showed me the paper. The paper that, when read correctly, spelled out the fate of all mankind. He had shown me the printout of the latest study, the latest figures on the newest project. The project tracking an asteroid's trajectory. I'm sure you could see what has happened. You can piece together the next event. Rick told the others. He showed the piece of paper which held thousands of calculations. They scanned over them with trained eyes, and they all saw the same thing I did. The course was a little off from what had previously been thought. I think the previous calculations had skipped a variable, or perhaps I entered a wrong digit. Whatever the case, there was nothing at that point that could fix it. I remember the others joined me at the viewport. We all stood, eyes wide, mouths squeezed shut. We had 2 hours at that point. If the estimations were correct, 2 hours. When you put a time frame on your life, things really seem to slow down. It feels like a day I stood there. The other members of the station with me, no one talked, just silence. For an hour, if I recall correctly, we stood there, shocked still. All we did was stare and think, and I remember 1,000 scenarios going through my mind, 1,000 ways in which I could stop all of this and save the world. And none were practical. I was first to break the silence. "How big?" I remember saying. "A planet killer," was the delayed response. More silence. "We won't tell them." I remember it now. I see it happening again. I spoke so softly. "Do you think we'll go too?" Rick said that. Rick said that. The tears had stopped by this point. No one replied for a while. "Yes. I remember being so quiet. It was then that I realized the futility of everything. It was then that I come to see that life was finished. We stood in silence for another hour. "Well, it was nice knowing you," Emily said. I could see her face in my mind. It was so peaceful. I can recall staring at her, watching her as we waited for what we thought would be our final moments. She was so peaceful then. In the 2 hours of silence, she had made peace with her demons. Have you ever seen a planet die? I doubt you have. To be honest, it's quite a beautiful thing. It would be a nice last image before death. That exact thought went through my head as we watched the asteroid crash into Earth. It happened extremely fast. We saw the giant rock float into view, then it drifted into the atmosphere surrounding Earth. There were several flashes, then small explosions. It looked almost like the Earth was firing at the foul rock, trying desperately to save itself, but by then, the rock was invincible. It sailed through the atmosphere and plummeted to the surface. And what followed was amazing. There was a flash, one huge, blinding flash, and I raised my hand to shield my eyes. I snapped them shut, trying in vain to keep the horrible light out. And after several seconds, I opened my eyes. What I saw was stunning. The Earth had broken apart into thousands of huge pieces. The insides of the planet, the organs, the blood, the molten rock, and the core erupted into space. The oceans were there for a second, then gone. The atmosphere, the clouds, the ground, all evaporated into horrible dust. Everything was enveloped into a sea of red and orange and black, but in all the destruction, it seemed almost as if the remnant of the planet were dancing. The huge fragments that were once continents and land masses bumped into each other and spun in wild circles. The innards of the planets oozed and melted, with the huge chunks looking almost like capes of orange and red. We all stood watching, mesmerized. It took several moments to realize that we weren't dead. Somehow, after all the terror of waiting for death, it had vanished. We had been spared. Silence resigned for several minutes. Then it was broken. Is this hell? It was I who voiced the question. I sure hope not. This time it was Rick who spoke. The next thing I recall is a day later. To be totally honest, I have no clue whatsoever what transpired after we watched the Earth die. The next thing in my mind is the following day. Yesterday. It was, yes. Yesterday. Yesterday was the day that they all died. And by they, I mean my crew, my men, the people on this lonely little forgotten vessel. We were all in the medical bay. Why, I couldn't tell you, but this is what my mind sees. That is the location that I associate with their deaths. Me and Rick were talking about how we had been spared, talking about how long we had to live. He said that we could last for years in the station. He said that we had everything we needed. What about food? I asked, trying to be the voice of reason. We have enough supplies to last us at least 6 months. The rest we can get from the greenhouse, he replied. What about oxygen? Said the voice of reason. We have enough to last 9 months. The rest we can produce by the greenhouse plants. Rick's voice quivered with excitement. I thought then, maybe we could last. We had food, oxygen, and power from solar cells. I really began to believe we could do it. And then it hit me hard. Water. It could have worked. Absolutely would have worked if Earth still existed. We had all forgotten that only 4 days prior the water purification system had failed. Forgotten that in 3 days we would have to receive replacement parts. But now, I remembered that we would never get them. I remembered that the only place in the universe that could have supplied them had vanished. What about water? Rick stopped his calculations and looked up. His face showed pain, defeat. He realized it too. If we hadn't enough water, we might... Rick worked furiously, trying to do math quickly, but I already knew. We had 4 people who would need water for everything. Drinking, bathing, and menial tasks like brushing your teeth. We had at most enough for a few weeks. Yesterday, that was enough, since we only needed it until the system was repaired. Now it seemed like a raindrop. Rick, there's not enough. I remember speaking quietly again. I remember shaking my head slowly at first. I remember turning and leaning forward against the counter. Just wait! Let me do the math! Rick said as his pen wrote faster, but I knew deep down, just like he did, that there was no chance. It was then that I saw the scalpel. It sat there in its bath of green, sterile liquid, the silver handle reflecting the light. I stared at it for a moment. And then I made a decision. I would save them. By killing them. It took me a split second to decide this. I don't really know what switched on in my mind. Maybe something cracked, snapped. Maybe that would be a better explanation for what happened. All I know is that I grabbed the scalpel and turned around, and I saw them all sitting at the table. Rick had his back to me. He was hunched over his paper. I paused for half a second, then I moved quickly, as to make sure that I did it before I realized what I was doing. I was behind Rick in an instant. Emily looked up. Our eyes connected. She saw the knife. She nodded. I struck the first part of the body that came to mind. I jerked the knife up and shoved it into Nick's temple. I screamed on the inside and hoped with all my soul that it was painless, that he had not felt a thing. He didn't mutter a word, and not a single noise escaped his lips, save for a sigh. Really, it was just an expulsion of air, silent. His head slumped onto the table. I turned to Emily next. She looked up at me as I approached, and her eyes were so clear then, so beautiful. Yet I knew what I must do. I was saving them. I was making the inevitable death quick and painless. I was doing the right thing. And when I reached Emily, she turned her head slightly, exposing her temple to me. I wanted to burst into tears. I wanted to take the blade and ram it into my own heart and die. But I couldn't. I had to finish. I made it quick. I shoved the knife into Emily's head. She made the smallest yelp and slumped over her chair. I ripped the knife from her and turned to Paul. I couldn't stop and think. I had to just act. He had heard the noise and turned. I ran at him, knife raised. He fought back as I began to swing wildly, cutting his chest and arms, and I managed to knock him over, and I stabbed wildly at his head and neck, and I prayed that I would hit something vital and it would end it. He finally stopped fighting and went limp. Blood gushing from his mouth and neck. And I got to my feet. And I looked around then, and my shirt was covered in blood, and my hands drenched in it, and I dropped the knife, and my hands began to shake wildly, and I began to think again. That happened last night. I'm still wearing the blood-soaked shirt. I went to the control room after that to shut the life support system. I then came to this room, and the only cabin with a window. I think I began writing this. I think I saved them. I think I did the right thing. Or maybe I'm insane, and I'm trying to justify their deaths. It really doesn't matter now. I'm going to die in just a few moments. The air is thinner than ever. Seems like I'm taking huge gulps just to function, and my vision is ever darkening. I can feel the eyes on my back right now. I think I'll sit by the window as I go. The earth truly does look pretty today. Signed, Louis Farnick. Well, boils and ghouls, it looks like here we are, the final day of the spring break spooktacular. My heart's so broken that it's killing me. But don't worry, guys, I'll be back again in Halloween, and you can still expect to see some wonderful stories from around the internet. 500 videos down, thousands more to go. Thanks for listening, kiddies, and sweet dreams.